So first and foremost, welcome and good morning, BOMA members. It's really good to be seen, and it's really good to see here all of our BOMA community today. I'm Tori Brubaker. I'm Member Services Director for BOMA San Francisco, and I'm privileged to have the opportunity to share with you today, with our speaker, some practical tips for engaging a virtual team in the new normal. And joining me today is Becky Barton, founder and principal HR consultant for People 415, a San Francisco-based consulting firm providing people solutions for growing companies. The team at People 415 works with their partners to on a variety of different industries on matters affecting their employees, from hiring to firing and everything in between. And as you can guess, right now they've been working very closely with their clients to navigate the impact of COVID-19 on their businesses and their employees. So good morning and welcome, Becky.
Thank you for having me, Tori.
Thank you for joining us. It's really difficult for me not to turn to my left or my right when I'm talking to people rather than just staring straight, but it's all part of that. It's all part of that new normal. So we've all been in shelter in place for 10 weeks. And at some point, this will end. But I think we can all agree that remote working will continue to play a huge role in our lives, in our companies, and in our members' tenancies for the foreseeable future. So what is essential to successfully manage and engage virtual teams for long-term success?
Yeah, great question, Tori, and one that a lot of companies are grappling with now. We're beyond that sort of initial flurry of activity of setting up remote working, VPNs, getting laptops, up to speed, and all the fire drills that go along with that. So really, 10 weeks into this is a great opportunity to hit the reset button. And that's for both ourselves as employees, as well as anyone we might manage on a team. And really, number one, I would say, is communication. It's more important now than ever. Really be intentional to ask your employee, can you take on this project? How are things going? Align on those expectations. We don't have the luxury of passing each other in the hallway any longer. So you really have to, schedule those, sort of water cooler chats and schedule those one-on-one meetings with your employees. And that way you can really align on, okay, what's the deliverable, what's the deadline, and then get some agreement with your team. Perhaps 1 week, meeting once a week was effective in the pre-COVID era. Maybe it's not enough anymore. Maybe you need to meet more frequently. A lot of clients are moving towards sort of daily short huddles every morning, maybe even in the afternoon, depending on how it really depends on the employee base and how critical a project is in terms of, other reliabilities with other team members. I think it's a great opportunity too to think about different communication tools. Phone might be best, video, text. You really have to just do what makes sense for your workflow as well as your audience.
So it sounds like management, possibly more than ever, really needs to listen to their employees and integrate that individual feedback into their overall management style.
Definitely. I mean, I think that's why the communication and alignment is so important, because people really are in different places in terms of, what they can take on and what they can deliver. And that communication alignment is so important.
Great. What about the kind of new workday?
Yeah, definitely something that's shifting here. So a big trend we're seeing is, people are working really kind of all hours of the day, morning, noon, night. There's a lot of different challenges in our workday now. Speaking as a work from home, now teacher, quasi-teacher of a fourth grader and a kindergartner, it's really important to think about, maybe there's alternate times to meet with your team. Maybe a team member would be better served to meet at with you at 5 or Saturday AM. Just think about those things because everyone's juggling a lot right now. Maybe leveraging technology, recording a short video or something in terms of, giving instructions to a team or asking for their feedback. So you really need to work with your team to find out what the right office hours are to keep them aligned and balanced. But it is important, I would say, if a team is relying on other people to do their work, try to see if you can come up with some sort of core common hours for the team to work together. It might just be a couple hours in the morning, a couple hours in the afternoon. But if they collaborate a lot, that's really important to have some sort of alignment around that.
Okay. Now, we were all thrown into this overnight, and we adapted quite quickly and quite well, I would say. But as it continues, what if there's questions that arise about proper working from home workstations?
Mm-hmm.
What are your thoughts on that, or what are you hearing about that?
Yeah, I think it's really important to, create, if you don't already have a policy around working from home, to work with your team, your HR team, create that, as well as creating a budget around work from home equipment. In some states, California, it may even be required to reimburse certain expenses, so you need to be aware of that. But the longer that this remote work scenario is in play, which I think it is really here to stay, we're seeing, big cues from some of the large employers, specifically in San Francisco, like Twitter, that are saying, you can work from home indefinitely. So you really need to think about that, kitchen table workstation may not be good for the long haul. The exposure for repetitive stress type injuries from poor economics really increases the longer this work from home scenario is in play. So really think about, are your employees set up to be safe and productive while working at home?
Yeah. So what about those that are experiencing the challenges of homeschooling or dependent care, and the fact that some of that care may not be available as we move forward? How should managers be interacting with that for, once again, long-term success?
Yeah, absolutely. This one really hits home. We're starting to get the notifications of cancellations of camps this summer. So it's really important, again, communication. That's going to be the most important thing to do right now. Ask your working parents, what they need. Do they need help? Do they need an extended deadline? Ask your single working parents even twice as often. They really need your support right now. As a manager, consider setting up an out of office message for yourself if you have homeschooling responsibilities, and encourage your team members to do the same. This is something that I found to be very effective to communicating when people could rely on me and not rely on me in terms of, what might wait a little bit longer, or when they might need to escalate something in another means. So consider that just to help manage your own day. I found that some companies also have set up a code in their payroll system for logging time associated with homeschooling. If that's an option for your company, it really does give that kind of okay for parents to spend that time balancing those childcare responsibilities. And also look at the overall team. Perhaps you have some team members that don't have the burden of young children, for example, and maybe can take on more of those time sensitive projects, and maybe you could shift the work around and balance that out between the different team members. So just try and think a little bit creatively with your team to see if things can be shifted around.
So you've been working in human resources for 2 decades, and you've seen the cycles, you've seen the good and the challenging times. What is your recommendation for that one thing a leader should do and can do to keep their team operating at a high level and feeling really engaged?
I think leading by example is so important right now. Employees are going to follow, what their manager does in practice. Even if as a manager you're working around the clock, I've seen more and more of my clients using email tools like delayed send and not sending things until the morning so that the team doesn't feel compelled to answer, morning, noon, and night. So I think that's really important. I would be very intentional about expectations with employees. what is reasonable during this time, really be obviously very clear in communicating. If you expect your employees to work and get off of work by 5, communicate those things so that you don't burn out your employees. I think that's what's important during this time, because it's easy to kind of fall into, now that the work and life, general life worlds are now collided, it's easy to just keep working throughout the day and well into the evening. Employees really feel loyal to a good and caring manager. It's the number one reason they stay or leave a company. And so really keeping that connection strong with your people, staying human with them is so important right now.
Great. Do you have any tips on how to build camaraderie among teams now that they're working virtually and don't get that opportunity to connect in person, or they're a little suffering from Zoom fatigue and things like that?
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure you all have probably heard a lot of, companies are using, different icebreakers, happy hours, things like that over Zoom to try to keep things light. Just keep things human is what I would say. So you can, do the games at the start of the meeting, things like that to connect on, stay connected with the team. But it's really about caring about our people right now and asking them what they need. And you don't have to be intimidated about the response. You don't have to provide everything, but the fact that you ask will go a long way to really build that, stronger relationship with your employees. Yeah. Some clients are also like using things like, they used to have a budget for in-office lunches and social hours and things like that. They're starting to shift that to, using that money to order lunch and then to the employees' homes, and then they can still dine together, or getting some sort of other type benefit in there that they can feel, working remotely.
Interesting. Yeah. So we've talked a lot about what a manager can do to lead to positive outcomes in this new normal. But what about us as individuals? What can we be doing to set ourselves up for success?
Yeah, again, I'm going to hammer the idea of communication. Let your supervisor know what's going on with you, what they can expect from you, and especially if you can't deliver. If you're going to miss a deadline, you need to be ahead of that. You need to be communicating. Self-care, so important right now. Take your breaks, get up every hour, stretch, make sure you're getting your exercise in, take breaks from social media. It can be very distracting and negative right now, as we've all probably experienced. Keep your healthy food and snacks on hand for when you have those particularly busy days and you need to just grab something, and be very intentional. Make sure you maintain a routine so that you have all of those triggers in your work to put you in work mode, and also to get you out of work mode so you can shift between your work day and your personal life.
Well, it's interesting because you mentioned routine, and for many of us, a big part of our routine was our commute. And I'm sure many people, including myself, could say, I don't miss the commute per se, but the commute served as a definitive transition between professional and personal. And it was, I have to step away from the computer because I've got to jump on BART or drive my car or pick up my carpool. But oftentimes that was also a time when we connected with friends or family, or we connected with ourselves because we were alone. And so that's, interesting. Sometimes the things of our routines that we may not like actually gave us that break.
Definitely. A lot of people use commute time to connect with friends, family. Again, still do that. Make sure you're scheduling that into the day. You mentioned connecting with yourself. Definitely a lot of times commute is a time for podcasts, meditation, positive affirmations. Keep that all built into your routine so that you don't let go of those good habits as well.
Right. So what about, I know we had talked before this, what about at the end of the day if things aren't working? Are there some alternatives people can consider just if they need to adjust a little bit better?
Yeah, absolutely. Utilize whatever resources you have within your company. A lot of, particularly the larger employers, generally have an employee assistance program. Smaller employers sometimes do as well. If you have that, if your employer offers that, be sure and use it. There are a lot of resources through an employee assistance program related to mental health, or just connecting you to other resources within your community. Something else to consider, if it's just not working and the balance just isn't possible right now for whatever reason, maybe a short-term leave of absence or reduced hours might make sense. I'm seeing employers have policies around taking, certain leaves. There may be job protection, depending on the size of your employer and how long you've been there. And it could also create a win-win for the employer as well, because if you were to take, say, reduced hours or some sort of leave of absence or furlough, it's a way for you to maintain your health care, yet, while not working, and then also alleviate some of the payroll expense on behalf of the employer. So that could be a good win-win if there's a certain maybe lull in your business at this time.
Right. So I want to turn over to the audience to see if there are any questions coming from you. I don't think I currently see any, but thank you. Our first question. So Becky, do you have any recommendations for team members who may be struggling with a home work setup, and how may they best be able to separate their personal workspace with square footage constraints?
Square footage constraints.
I like
That's an interesting question. Yeah. This must be a San Francisco person. Yeah, it's very challenging. As I will tell you, as a I'm challenged with it myself. I'm have the good fortune of sheltering in the Russian River, and I'm utilizing a space that is not normally used as an office. This is generally used for our sleeping quarters. So you do have to kind of be creative in that way. I think, I've seen a lot of employees use, virtual background on Zoom so that they don't have to worry about what's behind them. So that's certainly, if Zoom is a tool that you use, and likely other tools have this as well, setting up a virtual background, if it's not really embedded in the tool that you have, you can purchase a green screen or something like that fairly easily, so that you don't have to worry about, maybe the messy kitchen behind you or what have you. I do believe that people are being more flexible and understanding to work environments. So I know that we all, certainly the BOMA members are notorious for being extremely professional. And I think that we just have to realize, let's connect on a human level, give a heads up if something's going to, it's like when we just logged into the call today, if a little person might be walking in behind you while you're on a call, just give the other caller a heads up on that. And chances are, I think people are going to be more understanding. Everyone's really kind of thirsty for that human connection right now.
Right.
So I wouldn't beat yourself up over too much. Yeah.
So second question, are you finding that some clients report that their teams are actually more productive?
Absolutely. So I think this plays into kind of that longer workday too, because we don't have those commute times. So a lot of people are getting up. My husband is a great example of this. He gets up at 6 a.m. and starts his workday. He used to commute an hour and a half each way down to Palo Alto, not doing that now. So really baking that into your workday as far as what you might have been doing previously under a commute. And also you don't have the kind of the chatter that there's a downside to not having that relationship in the office, and the chatter and the water cooler thing with not staying connected to your teammates, but also that does, allow you to have really focused time. So I think this is a good indication of how companies are starting to really embrace working from home and keeping it as part of their, offering in terms of work environments for their people.
Right. So here's a question from a leader. As a leader, it is becoming difficult to lead a large team and keep them motivated, entertained, while we as leaders are burning out. Any recommendations on how to pause and reduce the number of video calls without damaging the expectations we've put in place, so that they don't feel abandoned, but at the same time, give us a needed break?
Yeah. I do hear of this challenge as well. I think a lot of teams are using the small breakout rooms more and more. I'm seeing on, say, Zoom, for example. This is not a commercial for Zoom, but just because that's a pretty popular tool. They're really leveraging the technology to allow for more smaller groups, and that's a way to elevate a team member. If you haven't thought about succession planning, I think this is a great time to think about it. Who might be your next generation of leaders? Can you tag them to help out with some of this management stuff and leading conversations? So test out some small breakout rooms, test out nominating, different people to lead those groups, see if you can leverage your existing team to make that happen. I think the other question that it didn't come from this person in particular, but another question I've gotten in the past is just, how do you keep the team on track or certain projects on track if it seems like things are not really happening as effectively as in the office? And to that, I would say you might need more frequent check-ins, and then maybe they're smaller, and so consider maybe the huddles and things like that, as opposed to like a large meeting with a lot of people. It might be better just to do them in smaller chunks. Certainly the kindergarten teachers are doing that as well, which seems to be much more effective.
About that last question, the one thing that really resonated is that I think sometimes leaders, even the best of them, lead by example and taking care of their people, but circling back to something we talked about is they need to take care of themselves. But on them, it's taking care of themselves and communicating back to their people that they need to take care of themselves.
Absolutely.
As well. And just define, I'm suffering from a bit of burnout too. And maybe these are the 2 times of the week that I am just, unavailable. And it's because I need to focus on keeping me, sane through this. And I think maybe the more that you communicate that, people realize that that person is a human too.
Absolutely. I do think there's value in that, because once you communicate that as a manager, you're telling your employees that it's okay for them to say that as well. So I think that's a really smart move for a manager.
Now, here's one that's going to affect everybody in different ways, and our members' tendencies in different ways, and their employees. But the question is, how do you deal with feelings of being anxious to return to work versus anxiety about getting on public transportation and being exposed to so many people again?
Definitely. Yeah. We really haven't seen the effects of this yet, given where we are in terms of, at least here in, the local Bay Area, in terms of, restrictions being, lifted and the things like that. But I do think employers need to be prepared for this. Right now, under COVID-19, really we were, the Office of Employment Standards for San Francisco particularly lifted the requirement of a doctor's notice. So like if you were to have COVID-19 symptoms, you can't require your employee to produce a doctor's note. We don't want to burden unnecessarily, healthcare providers. So I'm going to guess that will probably be applied to perhaps mental health concerns that might come out of returning to the workplace. So right now, where I'm sitting today, and this will evolve over time, right now it seems like employers are really being asked to, be pretty patient with their employees, keep as many working remotely as they can, and really just focusing on only the essential employees coming back, because it will be a challenge to get everyone. Well, we really don't want everyone to come back to the workplace at one time, but certainly, traffic predictions are looking pretty ugly right now, with, people being uneasy with taking public transportation and the like. So I would give flexibility to my team members.
Okay. Are there any other questions from the audience that you want to throw out there at this time? Anything, Becky, you think we haven't touched on, or since the last time in our planning sessions, new issues that have come up in the past 5 days?
Yeah, I wouldn't say necessarily new issues, but I just to hammer home, just go to the basics, communication. Again, I think it's just the most important thing to do. Connect with your team, get alignment, ask them how they're doing, ask them where they need help, and employees as well. Communicate up, communicate what you need, communicate where you need help, blockers, things like that. So that would be my number one thing to leave our audience with.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much for your time today. We really appreciate working with you ourselves and what you're doing for your clients as well. If anyone has any questions after this, please don't hesitate to give us a call, give us an email. We hope to answer your questions. Thank you for joining us today, and be well, and we hope everyone has a easy and efficient time getting back into what continuing in the new normal, but also as they engage with tenants coming back in buildings and whatnot. Please do refer to BOMA and our COVID-19 resource page as we keep on adding things to that. And if you have any questions, don't hesitate to contact us. So thank you very much for your time today. Take care.
Thank you, Tori. Take care.
Thanks. Bye-bye.